Class President, Chapter 6, A Very Smart Cookie. Friday of the first week of school was the bake sale. Everyone in Julio's class went to school carrying bags and boxes of home-baked goodies. The packages were piled up on a large table in Mr. Flores' classroom. All morning, during arithmetic and social studies, the scent of chocolate, peanuts, and cinnamon drifted through the room. Julio kept looking up to check that his box of brownies was still there. Mr. Flores brought something to school that day, too. It was a guitar. "Can you play that?" asked Arthur Lewis in amazement. Mr. Flores nodded his head. When they were small kids, their kindergarten teacher had played little melodies on a piano in the classroom. But since those days so long ago, the only person who performed any music was Mrs. Gwynn, the special music teacher who came to the school 2 days a week. She taught the children new songs and music appreciation, but they never had any music unless they were in the music room. "Will you play something for us?" asked Zoe. "This afternoon," said Mr. Flores, "we are going to have folk singing on Friday afternoons." Julio didn't know what folk singing was, but it sounded a lot better than arithmetic or social studies. Maybe Mr. Flores knew some rock songs. Lunch on Friday was fish burger in a bun with coleslaw and orange slices. "Gross," said Arthur. He always brought his lunch from home. Julio took a bite of his fish burger, pretended to gag, and let his body go limp at the table. "They got me this time," he moaned. He liked fish burgers, but he didn't want anyone else to know. After lunch, Cricket and Zoe put up a sign outside the classroom. Cricket made up the name, The Very Smart Cookie, because there was a bakery called The Smart Cookie near school. They already had hung signs all around the school building. A few teachers had arranged with Mr. Flores that they could take their classes to the sale. Julio thought they would make a lot of money, enough to pay for Arthur's new glasses. Promptly at 1:30, Mrs. Hockaday arrived with her third-grade class. Julio thought the kids looked like little babies. He couldn't believe that he had been that small when he was in third grade. Arthur, Sarah Jane, and Zoe were taking their turn acting as salespeople. "Show them my brownies," Julio called out. "Julio," said Mrs. Hockaday, smiling at her former student, "do you still call out in class? I guess you haven't changed that much at all." Julio grinned. "I'm still me," he agreed, "but this is the first time I ever made brownies." Mrs. Hockaday paid the 15-cent price and took a bite of one of Julio's brownies. "This is delicious, Julio," she said. After that, all the third graders wanted to buy Julio's brownies. "I guess Mrs. Hockaday gave you a celebrity endorsement," Lucas said to Julio. "It's the same as why you want to buy the sneakers like those of a famous basketball player in a TV commercial." The third graders were buying Julio's brownies so fast, he was sorry that he hadn't made more. By the time he had a turn to be a salesperson, there wouldn't be any left. Mr. Flores opened his guitar case and began strumming. "Play a song we all know," said Julio. Mr. Flores played "She'll Be Comin' Around the Mountain," and even the third graders, with their mouths full of brownies, sang along too. When Mrs. Hockaday's class left, Cricket, Lucas, and Ann Crosby took over the cookie sales. Mr. Flores kept strumming his guitar. Julio hoped there would be something left to sell when it was his turn. "We already made $3.75, said Cricket, counting the coins in the money box. Other classes came and went. A few mothers came to the sale too. Lucas was back in his seat, and Julio was selling cookies when Lucas's mother arrived with Lucas's little brothers. "Uh-oh, here comes trouble," Julio muttered when he saw the almost 4-year-old twins. Marcus and Marius were famous for their mischief. "Hello, Julio," called out either Marcus or Marius. Even though he had known them all their lives, Julio had never figured out a way to tell the twins apart. Marcus or Marius grabbed a chocolate chip cookie from the display on the table. "Hey, that cost 10 cents, said Julio. Either Marcus or Marius stuffed the cookie into his mouth, and the other twin grabbed a cookie too. "Mrs. Cott, you owe us 20 cents, called Julio. Then Marcus or Marius grabbed another cookie. "Make that 30 cents, said Julio. Lucas got out of his seat. The students had been told that only the salespeople were to leave their seats during the bake sale. But the arrival of his twin brothers had to be a reason to break that rule. There was no way a mother could control both of his brothers at the same time, especially when they were facing a table full of cookies and cakes. "Hey, Lucas, let them take all they want," Julio protested. "That's how we'll make a lot of money." Mrs. Cott held out a dollar bill. I will take 7 more cookies if you have a bag to put them in. Then we're going home, she said firmly. Luckily, Cricket had thought of everything, including bags. Julio put 7 cookies in a bag and put the dollar bill into the money box. By now, there were a number of dollar bills and loads of change. He hoped there would be enough for Aunt Arthur's glasses. Mr. Flores nodded to the next group of salespeople. Julio stepped out from behind the table. I'm thirsty, said either Marcus or Marius. Too bad we're not selling containers of milk, Julio thought. That was one thing Cricket hadn't thought of. You can have a drink when we get home, Mrs. Cott said to either Marcus or Marius. I want a drink now, said either Marcus or Marius. I could take them to the fountain, offered Julio. He turned to Mr. Flores, who nodded that he could leave the room. Julio took each twin by the hand. Their hands were sticky from the cookies, but walking with them made him feel very grown up. He wondered if Nelson and Ramon had felt that way when they were walking with him when he was little. When they reached the fountain, Julio let go of their hands. He realized that the boys were too short to reach the fountain at this end of the hallway. There was a lower fountain outside of the kindergarten room. He should have thought of taking them there. Let me help you, he said to either Marcus or Marius. He lifted them up so his mouth could reach the spigot where the water came out. Push the button, Julio said. Either Marcus or Marius pushed it and the water came out. The little boy made a loud slurping sound as he drank. Julio remembered that he had done the same thing in kindergarten. Slurping was a big deal with little kids. Now me, said the other twin. Julio put either Marcus or Marius down and picked up either Marcus or Marius, and they felt exactly the same way. Their voices were the same and they looked identical. Poor Lucas, he thought as he held up one of his friend's brothers up to the fountain. How can he ever know whom he's talking to? I have to make pee-pee, said the twin, whom Lucas wasn't holding. The other twin stopped slurping. Me too, he said. Julio put down either Marcus or Marius. I'll take you to the boys' room, he told them, and he quickly led the way. He didn't want any accidents right there in the hallway. In the bathroom, Julio helped one of the twins unzip his pants, and then he waited. Nothing happened. I thought you had to go to the toilet, Julio said. I don't have to go anymore, said either Marcus or Marius. What about you? Julio said, turning to look for the other twin. While Julio's back was turned, the little boy had climbed up onto the wash basin and filled his hands with liquid soap from the dispenser. He rubbed the liquid soap into his hair. Stop that, said Julio. I thought you had to go to the toilet. Not now, said either Marcus or Marius. I am having a shampoo. By now, there was quite a lather of soap suds in his hair. I want one too, said the other twin. No, said Julio. School is not a place for shampoos. Nobody comes to school for shampoo. The twin without soap suds in his hair began to cry in protest. You have to let me rinse the soap off, Julio said to the other twin. He turned on the water tap. Only the cold one worked. You got soap in my eyes, cried the little boy as Julio splashed cold water onto his head. Now both twins were crying. The door to the boys' bathroom opened and Lucas came in. What's going on? He asked over the sound of both twins crying. Man, your mother must be strong to be able to put up with both of these kids at once, said Julio. I took them for a drink, and then they said they wanted to go to the toilet, and then when I wasn't looking, this one started to give himself a shampoo. They've knocked me out. Shampoo? Marius, you hate shampoos, said Lucas, grabbing some paper towels to help dry his brother's head. I like shampoos at school, said Marius. How can you even tell who he is? Asked Julio. If you live with them every day, then you know, said Lucas simply. Julio and Lucas took the two little boys back to the classroom. Mrs. Cott was talking to Cricket Kaufman's mother. Cricket's little sister, Monica, was standing nearby looking like a little angel. She would probably never grab a cookie or give herself a shampoo in the school bathroom. Julio explained why one twin had wet hair. He was afraid Mrs. Cott would be angry at him. He probably didn't have much leadership ability if he couldn't even lead two little boys to the water fountain. Don't worry, Julio. You were a very smart cookie to keep up with these two, said Mrs. Cott. She pulled up the hood on the sweatshirt the little boy was wearing so that his head would be warm on the way home. Then she picked up her bag of cookies and waved goodbye to Mr. Flores and the class. Julio sat down in his seat, exhausted. A moment later, Arthur Lewis's mother arrived. She had a big smile on her face. In a loud voice, enough for everyone in the class to hear, she told Mr. Flores that because Arthur's glasses broke within his 2 weeks of his getting them, they were going to be replaced for free. Then we didn't need to have this bake sale at all, said Cricket. After Mrs. Lewis had left, everyone began to speak at once. Mr. Flores played a loud chord on his guitar and the class quieted down. The sale was fun, wasn't it? He asked them. Everyone nodded in agreement. What will we do with the money now? Asked Cricket. I'm sure we can think of a good way to spend it before the year is out, said Mr. Flores. We could have a party, suggested Sarah Jane. Or we could give it to a charity, said Zoe. There are a lot of possibilities. We don't have to make a decision today, said Mr. Flores. By the time the bell rang for dismissal, there was not one cookie or piece of cake or brownie left to be sold. The class had made $17.40, which Mr. Flores would hold for them. Don't spend it all over the weekend, he said. Julio. He was only kidding. He knew Mr. Flores wouldn't do that. You can trust me, Mr. Flores promised, holding his hand out to Julio. Julio shook the extended hand. 5th grade was turning out to be his best year yet.